Imagine this. You wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, your heart pounding against your ribs like a trapped animal. There's no nightmare, no immediate threat, just a sudden, crushing awareness that something is deeply wrong. Not with the world, not with your life, but with existence itself. You stare at the ceiling, and a question slithers into your mind, refusing to leave. What if the meaning of life is to suffer? At first, it sounds absurd. Life is supposed to be about happiness, success, love, isn't it? We chase pleasure, avoid pain, and tell ourselves that suffering is just a temporary obstacle on the path to fulfillment. But what if we've been wrong all along? What if suffering isn't a glitch in the system, but the system itself? Think about it. Every great story, every myth, every religion is built on struggle. The hero must endure trials before claiming the prize. The Buddha taught that life is suffering. Christ was crucified. Nietzsche declared, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." Even modern psychology confirms that growth comes only through discomfort, through facing the very things we fear. So why do we resist this truth so violently? Why do we numb ourselves with distractions, cling to false optimism, and pretend that suffering is something to be cured rather than understood? Perhaps because the alternative is terrifying. If suffering is inevitable, if it's woven into the fabric of being alive, then our entire worldview collapses. The self-help industry crumbles. The pursuit of constant happiness is exposed as a delusion. The modern obsession with comfort, security, and painless living becomes a tragic joke. But what if, buried beneath the fear, there's a revelation waiting? What if suffering isn't the enemy, but the key? Consider this. The moments that shaped you the most were not the easy ones. They were the losses, the heartbreaks, the failures that forced you to rebuild yourself. The nights you spent staring into the abyss, wondering if life was worth living, only to emerge, somehow, stronger. Suffering strips away illusions. It burns away the superficial and leaves only what's real. It's the fire that forges meaning. But here's the paradox. The more you run from suffering, the more it controls you. The more you accept it, even embrace it, the more power you reclaim. So the real question isn't, why do we suffer? But what if suffering is the point? And if that's true, what do we do next? You've been taught that suffering is a mistake, a malfunction, something to be fixed, medicated, or escaped at all costs. But what if the real malfunction is the belief that suffering shouldn't exist? Modern society operates on a single, unspoken commandment: avoid pain at all costs. We've built an entire civilization around distraction, instant gratification, and the illusion of control. Painkillers for physical discomfort, endless scrolling for existential dread, toxic positivity for despair. Yet the more we run, the more suffering chases us. Why? Because suffering isn't just random agony. It's a signal, a language, and we've been conditioned to ignore it. Philosophers and psychologists who dared to stare into the abyss understood this deeply. Schopenhauer called suffering the default state of existence. Desire leads to suffering, and even when we get what we want, boredom sets in. The cycle is inescapable unless we change how we relate to it. Carl Jung warned that avoiding suffering only magnifies it. The shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, grows stronger in the dark. True wholeness comes not from eliminating pain, but from integrating it. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, discovered in the depths of Auschwitz that even in unimaginable horror, meaning could be found. Those who survived weren't the physically strongest, but those who held onto a reason to endure. Nietzsche went further. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But he also warned of a darker truth, that most people would rather cling to comforting lies than face the brutal reality of existence. And that's exactly what we've done. We live in an age of unprecedented safety, yet rates of depression, anxiety, and existential despair have never been higher. Why? Because we've severed suffering from its purpose. For thousands of years, suffering had meaning. It was initiation. It was sacrifice. It was the price of wisdom. But now, we treat it like a glitch in the system, something to be silenced, not understood. Psychology. Studies show that suppressing emotions amplifies them. The more you resist sadness, the longer it lingers. The more you fear anxiety, the stronger it grows. Neurology. Pain pathways in the brain strengthen when avoided. Conversely, facing suffering rewires the mind to endure it better. Culture. We've replaced rites of passage with safe spaces, struggle with shortcuts, and depth with dopamine hits. But nature doesn't care about our comfort. Life demands friction to evolve. Here's the cruel joke. The more we try to control suffering, the more it controls us. Addicts don't suffer because of the substance. They suffer because they believe the substance can erase suffering. The anxious don't suffer because of uncertainty. They suffer because they've been sold the lie that certainty is possible. The depressed don't suffer because life is meaningless. They suffer because they've been told meaning should come effortlessly. We've been handed a script that says, if you do X, you'll avoid pain. But the script is a lie. This leaves us with two choices. 1. Keep running. Numb, distract, and bargain with life in the desperate hope that suffering will spare you. It won't. 2. Turn and face it. Ask the terrifying question. What if suffering isn't the enemy, but the teacher? The first path leads to a life of quiet desperation. The second, that's where the real journey begins. You don't notice the cage until you try to move. For years, even decades, you might live under the illusion of freedom, making choices, chasing dreams, believing you're in control. But beneath the surface, an invisible force shapes everything. Your terror of suffering. This is how the avoidance of pain becomes its own prison. Every decision you make is filtered through an unconscious question. How can I minimize discomfort? You stay in dead-end relationships because loneliness scares you more than stagnation. You cling to unfulfilling jobs because uncertainty feels like existential freefall. You scroll, snack, binge, and numb because facing the void inside seems worse than wasting your life. This isn't laziness. This isn't weakness. This is conditioning. A society that worships comfort has taught you that suffering is failure, and so you arrange your entire life around avoiding it. But here's what no one tells you. The more you build your life around escaping pain, the smaller your life becomes. Modernity promised us safety. Instead, it gave us a new kind of suffering, one that doesn't scar the flesh, but hollows out the soul. Relationships become transactions. What can you do for me? Instead of, what truth can we face together? Work becomes a soul-crushing grind. You trade your vitality for the illusion of security, only to wake up at 50 wondering where your fire went. Identity becomes fragile. You craft a persona designed to be liked, approved of, validated, until you forget who you were beneath the mask. The ancient Greeks had a word for this: akrasia, the state of acting against your own best judgment. You're betraying yourself, but the fear of suffering keeps you compliant. We've built entire industries to help us stay asleep. Social media isn't just addictive. It's a collective hallucination where we pretend we're not dying. Consumerism isn't just materialism. It's a desperate attempt to fill the God-shaped hole with things. Politics isn't just tribalism. It's a way to outsource our existential anxiety to a team, a leader, an ideology. These aren't vices. They're survival strategies. When meaning is scarce, we'll take numbness over nothingness. But numbness has a cost. Psychology has a brutal rule. What you refuse to feel controls you. Unexpressed grief becomes depression. Unfaced rage becomes passive aggression. Unacknowledged fear becomes chronic anxiety. Like a shadow, suffering grows larger the more you run from it. And so, you find yourself trapped in a paradox. The less suffering you're willing to endure, the more powerless you become. This is where most people stop. They see the cage, they feel its weight, and they rationalize. This is just how life is. But a rare few snap awake. They realize, I have been negotiating with my own imprisonment, and that's when the real rebellion begins. The moment you realize suffering cannot be escaped, only transformed, everything changes. This is the great pivot, the point where victims become warriors, where pain, once your jailer, becomes your weapon. All this time, you've been told suffering is the enemy, but the real enemy was the lie that you could live without it. Now, the rebellion begins with a single, blasphemous thought. What if I stopped running? Not to surrender, not to wallow, but to wield it. History's most profound thinkers discovered the same secret. Stoics didn't avoid pain. They trained in it. Cold showers, voluntary hardship. They knew. What you practice enduring, you gain power over. Shamans didn't fear darkness. They courted it. Vision quests, psychedelic trials. They understood the wound is where the light enters. Existentialists didn't beg for meaning. They forged it. Sartre wrote, Hell is other people, not as despair, but as liberation. If life has no script, you get to write it. This is the first law of rebellion. Suffering endured voluntarily ceases to be suffering. It becomes initiation. How does this look in a life? 1. The pain audit. For 1 week, track every time you avoid discomfort, procrastination, scrolling, people-pleasing. Then ask, what truth am I hiding from? The answer is your roadmap. 2. Micro crucibles. Take cold showers. Have hard conversations. Sit in silence for 30 minutes. This isn't masochism. It's neurological resistance training. Each small victory rewires your fear response. 3. The meaning reframe. When suffering strikes, stop asking, why me? Start demanding, what is this trying to show me? A breakup isn't rejection, it's redirection. Failure isn't defeat, it's data. Depression isn't a curse, it's a forced introspection. Across history, those who changed the world were not the comfortable. They were the initiated. Nietzsche spent his final years in madness and pain, yet his ideas reshaped civilization. Beethoven composed his greatest works while deaf. Frankl found freedom in Auschwitz by deciding, they can take everything but my attitude. Their secret? They stopped seeing suffering as something happening to them and started seeing it as something happening for them. Here's the revolutionary truth. The system wants you afraid of suffering because as long as you're terrified of pain, you'll obey authority. You'll consume endlessly. You'll never question the machine. But when you embrace suffering as your teacher, you become ungovernable. You've reached the edge of the map. Beyond here lies the truth that changes everything. But first, you must let go of one final illusion. All this time, you've believed suffering was either 1. A cruel accident of existence, or 2. A test to overcome. But there's a third option. One so radical it reconfigures reality itself. Suffering is not opposed to meaning. It is meaning's raw material. Not the obstacle, not the punishment. The clay. Consider fire. To wood, it is destruction. To metal, it is transformation. You've been the wood. Now you must learn to be the metal. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote, "You must become chaos to give birth to a dancing star." The suffering wasn't the enemy. Your resistance to being reshaped by it was. Stars die to create planets. Cells divide through stress. Evolution requires extinction. At every scale of existence, the mechanism of creation is destruction. Your personal suffering isn't an exception. It's the rule. The universe works this way. Now the ultimate question, will you collaborate with this process or continue fighting it? To collaborate means seeing depression not as a malfunction, but as a demolition of false selves, viewing heartbreak not as betrayal, but as the stripping of illusions, regarding failure not as shame, but as necessary friction. This is how alchemy works, not by avoiding the dark, but by composting it into gold. Here's the secret they never taught you. The part of you that suffers cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. Every loss stripped away something temporary. Every pain burned off an illusion. What remains? The unkillable core that chose to stay. This is your immortal self, the one who watched all the other versions of you die and said, still here. From this vantage point, life's great choice becomes clear. 1. Continue believing suffering is a mistake and spend your life running from shadows. 2. Accept it as the curriculum and let it forge you into something unimaginable. The first path leads to comfort and quiet despair. The second to battles and unimaginable freedom. So now you stand at the threshold. Behind you, the life of avoidance. Before you, the fire of becoming. Step forward and the old world burns away. Stay still and it slowly suffocates you. The choice was never about avoiding suffering. It was always about what kind of suffering is worthy of you. Will you suffer the slow death of an unlived life? Or the glorious burn of becoming? The forge is hot. The hammer is in your hands.